If you found this podcast, chances are you're a high achiever and you're successful. But now you're stuck and stressed, and you realize that everything you've created hasn't given you the fulfillment and the joy you thought it would. This is where we discuss the keys of high performance mindset and stepping into the next best version of yourself. Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast, where we bring you guests to inspire you and strategies to help you tap into your potential and become your best self. I'm your host, Ian Bowen, and today I am joined by the one and only Mitch Matthews. Mitch, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Honored to be here. This is great, Ian. I love what you're doing. It's such an important message.
Well, I appreciate that. And Mitch, the honor is all mine. And I have to introduce you to our audience in case our listeners and viewers don't know Mitch Matthews. So here I go.
Here we go.
So, Mitch, I mean, you're the creator of the Dream, Think, Do podcast. You're a success coach, speaker, serial entrepreneur, and host of EncouragerCon, which we were just talking about. I had the pleasure of being a part of earlier this year. It is an amazing conference. Any of you guys out there listening or watching that are thinking about becoming a coach, or you are a coach, or you want to write a book, or you want to start a podcast, get to EncouragerCon 2025 in Des Moines, Iowa. You will not be sorry. It is an amazing event. Now, just to go on with some more accolades of Mr. Matthews. Not only is he a speaker and the elite success coach, but you've spent like the last 2 decades helping huge organizations like Nike, United Airlines, and NASA. What? Hello.
Come on.
Okay.
Come on.
Yeah. You've built a business training program that's helped thousands of life and success coaches from around the world to build successful and profitable businesses of their own. And most importantly, have to add in here that you are a dad, you are a husband, a lifelong learner, and as you say, a highly caffeinated man in Des Moines, Iowa. And I have to say, I had the pleasure of meeting your family at EncouragerCon, and they are wonderful people as well.
Oh, man, I am wildly blessed, my friend, as you are. We both married up.
Man, tell me
no doubt. Like, you are a rock star, but Dana, come on. Man. Come on. Same thing for me. Melissa, amazing. God is good and loves me very much because I definitely married up. So, yeah, so honored to be here, man. Thank you so much for that welcome. Sheesh.
Yeah, I
think we're done here. I think this is fantastic. Great conversation.
Yeah, it was good. We'll see you next time. But Mitch, I've been waiting to have you on the show because in my mind, man, you are like one of the generals in the army of the light, man. Like you lead the way, and just your positive persistence is like, that's the epitome of the things that we talk about on this show. And I just want to get into more about you and your background and things that you do so our listeners and viewers can really glean some pearls that I know that you're going to drop in this conversation. But where I want to start is the Dream, Think, Do, which is the name of your podcast. But I'm really curious about, where did you come up with the idea of Dream, Think, Do in the first place? And what does that name mean?
Ooh, that's such a good question. And it's one of those that I hope that it's a catchy name, right? I hope that it's good branding. But more importantly, Dream, Think, Do is what I believe a 3-step process for truly dreaming bigger, thinking better, and doing more. Okay. And it's one of those things that each step matters very much, and the sequence matters very much. And what's wildly important is to not start, to start the process, but to not move into the next step too quickly. Okay. So when we say dream, think, do, I think you need to reserve some time, reserve some space, give yourself permission to dream for a little bit, right? To think about, what are those things you want to do? What are those things you want to achieve? What are those things you want to experience? And really allow yourself windows of time to just dream almost with reckless abandon, right? And I know some people get hung up on that dream word, like, I don't know what my dreams are and our dreams goals and
Yeah.
honestly, something I've been talking with people a lot about lately is maybe replace the dream word with experience. Like, don't worry about what your dreams are. What would you love to experience more in life? What would you love to experience? Is it peace? Is it happiness? Would you love to experience different parts of the world? Would you love to experience different types of achievement? That kind of thing. But truly give yourself space and time and permission to dream. And you don't want to move into the next step, which is the thinking step, too early, because what happens so often is if you move into thinking, which is a very important step, that's where we start to plan. That's where we start to think through sequence. That's where we start to think about what do we need? Who do we need to connect with? What do we need to build? All those things. That is a very important step, but often people move into it too early. And so they limit their dreaming. They get incremental dreaming as opposed to quantum dreaming. Incremental dreaming would say, well, we took a 7-day trip to Florida last year. Maybe this year we could go for 8. Or, if it's you at work, it's like, well, maybe we could increase, by 3% this year, right? That's incremental dreaming. That's when people move into that thinking mode too fast. But if you give yourself time and space and permission to dream, sometimes like amazing things can happen. That's where you can start to say, okay, what might we do? What could we do? What would we love to do? And I always say, like, it's a crazy example, but I love this example in that in the 70s, there was a guy named John Howard who was trying to drive awareness for bicycling. Like, you'll appreciate this, pedal bikes, right? Not motorcycles, but like pedal bikes.
Yeah.
And John Howard thought, what if we could like set a new speed record for somebody on a bike, right? And incremental thinking, incremental dreaming would say, well, how fast has somebody gone? Right. And that's generally what people start to do. It's probably in some ways what your brain has already started to do. Like, well, how fast have I gone on a bike? Like, I know I've probably gone 35 miles an hour going down a hill. Like, what do you think the fastest person on a bike, Ian, as you think about it? Like, what's the fastest person you think like somebody on a bike has gone?
Man, I'm just trying to think of I'm putting this into running terms, like just when I'm out for a run, like how fast am I actually going?
Right.
I can't imagine on a bike like you're gonna push past, and I mean if you're on a steep hill, maybe 35, 40 miles an hour. But if you're on a flat hill, like, you gotta be pushing 30 miles an hour, maybe.
Exactly. And that's what's happening in your brain. It's good. It's like how our brain works. We go into incremental thinking, which is basically it's relative thinking, saying, well, how fast have I gone?
Mm-hmm.
How fast is the fastest person that I've seen go? Maybe you watched, weekend sports somewhere and watched them on the Tour de France and, they're zipping down the Alps.
Yes.
And those guys, I guess, hit 60, maybe 70 miles an hour going down mountains sometimes. I wouldn't want that on those skinny little tires, but okay, right? But John Howard said, well, wait, what if a human could go over 100 miles an hour? How could we do that? It's not like, could we do it? He asked, how could we do that? And so you can pull up videos of you on YouTube of John Howard being drugged behind a drag race car and then released, and he was able to go 147 miles an hour on a bicycle. Not because he didn't ask, could we? He asked, how could we? Right? Incremental thinking gets you, well, let's get a little improvement. Let's go a little bit bigger. But quantum dreaming asks the could we, but more importantly, how could we? Right? So it's that thing of going, this past year, my wife and I took basically a 3-week trip. Never done that before, right? She works at our church, is very busy. I've got a couple of different businesses, those kinds of things. We've never really done that, but we're like, you know what? This summer, we're really, truly going to get away. And we didn't ask, should we? We just asked, how could we? And so we were able to do that. And it was incredible. It wasn't perfect, but it was incredible. About close as perfect as a human can get, right?
Yeah.
So it's that thing of sometimes you got to give yourself that space and time to dream first and then to think. Thinking is wildly important, breaking things down. Like you speak on positive persistence, and it's a beautiful thing. It's so needed. And part of persistence is to build a plan that's sustainable and to go after it and all those things. So I always say, it's not like we're saying don't think, don't plan. We're just saying don't rush into thinking, don't rush into planning. But once you're thinking, once you're planning, do it, and do it with bravado. And then the third step is that do, which is, as you know, so wildly important. And we talk a lot about that on Dream Think Do, of how do
Mhm.
you do? How do you start to move into taking action? You don't wait for the perfect time. You don't wait until you know everything you need to know. You just start, right? But if you start, if you do, after a little bit of dreaming, after a little bit of thinking, you'll go a lot further than you thought possible.
That's awesome. So
It's a very
for
long-winded response to a short question about a short name.
well, it's a short question. It might be a short name. It's a big idea.
Yes.
And so just what I'm hearing is in the dream part of Dream Think Do
Yeah.
that we don't want to fall into the trap of dreaming too small. Is that what
Right.
you're saying?
Absolutely. Well, and it's that
Incremental
thing
dreaming?
of not, dreaming is an interesting conversation because it's such an important word. It can be such an inspiring word, but dream can also be a hard word for some people.
Hmm.
I know some of my dreams have crashed and burned, right?
Right.
And some dreams that I've pursued did not go the way that I thought. And sometimes that led to pain, that led to challenge, right? That led to exhaustion, overwhelm, embarrassment. And you and I both know that on the other side of that then was a ton of learning, huge breakthroughs, new relationships, new awareness, things I'm wildly grateful for.
Yeah.
But if we're going to be honest, and I really believe that I know that's a high value for you, it's a high value for me. If we're going to be honest and transparent and authentic about these things, you know, a lot of people will say, like, go and pursue your dreams and you'll know you're on the right track when there's never a problem. Or I love the phrase of, if you love your work, there's never, you won't feel like you're working a day in your life. And I'm like, that's BS. I don't believe that at all. Like, I have a dream job, but still about 20% of my dream job I don't love, like
Yeah.
taxes and accounting and all that stuff, right?
Sure.
But it's that thing of dreaming. It's still so important to give yourself those moments. You don't have to be in a dream state all the time, but to give yourself space and time to dream, and maybe even have a couple of trusted friends or your spouse or someone who's encouraging to you that you can be encouraging to them, to do it together. And it's always amazing to see what can happen when people start to give themselves permission to dream. One of my favorite stories is we do these events called Big Dream Gatherings where people get to post their dreams, and then we like see if we can help each other out and encourage each other or
Yeah.
connect people, those kinds of things. And we did one in Georgia, and we went back a year later. And, as you can imagine, if you get 100 people or 500 people in a room, all sorts of different dreams go up on the wall. But a woman approached me when we came back to that same place. It was in Augusta, Georgia. And she came up and she said, "Hey, do you remember me from last year's event?" And I do believe in being honest, and I get to meet a lot of people. I was like, "No, I'm so sorry." And she goes, "That's okay. You wouldn't recognize me anyway." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And she said, "Well, I weighed 100 pounds more last year." I'm
Wow.
like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Was
Yeah.
that your dream? Was health your dream? Was the weight loss your dream?" She goes, "No, no, no." She said, "The dream," she's like, "I posted a number of dreams, but the dream that really made a difference for me is I simply wrote, I want to be happier more often." She's like, "That's the dream I really decided to focus on for the year." And she said, as I started to do that, I started to, implement. I started to think through what I could do. And then she's like, just like you talked about, I started to take action in small but significant ways,
Hmm.
in different ways, to experience happiness more and more joy and more peace. And she said, what was interesting is I really started to get intentional about that. I started to, just as a ripple effect, start to think about my health and started to take walks just for the fun of it. And I got a dog so that I'd walk all the time and things like that. And she's like, my goal was not, the big dream was not losing 100 pounds, but losing 100 pounds was a part of the ripple effect of me pursuing that dream.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's one of my favorite stories ever. Right. So it really, dreams can be a new and exciting car. It could be an amazing vacation. It could be a new job. It could be starting a company. It could be writing a book. It could be launching a business, whatever it might be. But sometimes it might be as simple as, I just want to be happier more often.
That's awesome. I'm glad you told that story because I think people do get tripped up on that dream word and they feel that it's, I don't know, maybe too ethereal or maybe it's just too out there. It's not tangible. It's not, it's not reachable. And it's like, I don't have time for dreams, but it doesn't have to be like this total life change thought. It could be something as simple as, I just want to be happier more often. That's awesome. I love that.
Yes.
Love it. So, Mitch, you have been doing this for a long time, like
20, about 400 years, I think.
Yeah. So, how did you get your start, and what were you doing before you got into this industry?
Yeah. So now I'm a full-time coach and speaker and trainer, and we split our time between me doing coaching and speaking myself and me training up other coaches and speakers because I love it. And I really want to impact as many people as possible. And I realized pretty early on, if I was going to impact the number of people that I wanted to impact, I couldn't do it alone. So, we started to train other coaches and speakers back in 2006. So I love it. But before I got started in 2002, I was it depends on how far you want to go back. I was kind of a weird kid. So I grew up in a small town in Newton, Iowa. And I didn't like a lot of the normal things. And I actually grew up a pretty sick kid. I had some medical conditions and things like that to sort through. So I didn't get to do a lot of the things that a lot of other kids did. But I got very interested in bikes. And bicycles again. Bikes just are a theme here today, I guess.
Yeah.
But we had a little bike shop, little hole in the wall bike shop in our town. It was a couple of blocks off of our main square. And it was right next to the Goodwill and around the corner from the only strip club in town. So it was the place to be. And I tell you what, right. But I just loved this shop and it was heaven for me. So the summer of my 12th year on this planet, I basically spent every hour that I could just like stalking the owner, doing whatever I could to not get arrested for loitering. I swept the alley. I, dusted shelves and bikes and all those things. I mowed the owner's lawn, all these kinds of different things. And the end of that summer, when I turned 13, he hired me. And so I worked at this bike shop all through junior high, all through high school, all through college. And it was a huge transformational experience for me. And what's funny is very early on, I stopped loving bikes and I fell in love with entrepreneurship. I didn't know that's what was happening, but that's exactly, looking back, that's exactly what happened. But I went on to college, lived in England a couple times, all that stuff. And then I got into business to business sales, which then moved into pharmaceutical sales. And entrepreneurship had bit me. So I had little side projects, little different entrepreneurial adventures as side kind of gigs while I was in pharma. But I had a pretty good run in pharma. I did really well in sales and then got promoted into training. And I got to help to run a $2 billion pharmaceutical company's training department, which was great. And then it happened. And I'm very grateful for it. But I got promoted into a bad fit job. And Ian, hopefully you've never had a bad fit job. But I knew within hours of accepting this position, I felt that, oh no. Because every position up to that point had been a great fit. I've been able to excel. I'd been able to enjoy it. I'd been able to kind of be at my best. And then just almost immediately, everything felt off. Nothing felt right. Nothing came easy. And it was, all the way with my customers, the leadership above me, all these different things. And I'm very grateful for it now. I was not at the time, because we also at that point were living a sitcom life, which was single income, 2 children, oppressive mortgage. So like I couldn't just quit my job. I so wanted to just quit my job, but Mel was staying home with her 2 boys at the time, and we'd kind of overbought because we thought, this is it, we're going to live here forever, and all these kinds of things. And so I was very stuck. And I look back now, and, at the time it was brutal. I mean, within 48 hours, within 3 or 4 days, I was like, just, oh no. But I couldn't leave it. And at the time I was just heartbroken because I had left something I really enjoyed. But I look back now and go, oh, this was so perfect. It was like divine timing, because it woke me up, because I was not supposed to live the rest of my life in pharma. It was a good run. I learned a lot. I was able to make an impact and make some good money and those types of things, but that's not where I was supposed to spend my days. And I look back and go, oh, if I had not had this bad fit job, I might have spent another 20 years there, right? But this thing woke me up to say, something's not right. I need to make it right. How do I do it? And as I started to ask those questions, I realized like making it right was not doing another promotion. I realized at that point, like, I'm not supposed to be in this industry anymore. And that's when the entrepreneurial whispers started to like sing to me a little bit more. And Mel, actually, I came home from a particularly bad day, and my wife put a magazine in front of me and she said, you need to read this story. And she pointed at a story, and it was a story of a really successful entrepreneur. And I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. I didn't really understand the industry, and I wasn't that interested in the person. She goes, no, not that main article, the side article. The side article is about that entrepreneur's coach. And I was like, okay. And I mean, this was like 2000, 2001. So life coaches existed, but it wasn't as well known at that time. And so I'm like, what is that? And she goes, I don't know what it is, but that's what you do. Like, you do that everywhere. You're like always asking questions. You're curious. You engage people. You always pull, kind of new ideas out of people, new solutions. You do that at church. You do that at parties. Sometimes it's even embarrassing, right? It's like, all that. She's like, that's what you do. We should find out about that. Like, how do you do that? And so that's what we did. And I found some training, to be a coach and to be certified as a coach. And so I pursued that all on the side. And then with the permission of my direct manager, I started to just build our business on the side, experimenting, figuring things out, making every mistake known to man. But then things started to click, and I started to set some goals and move from the dreaming to thinking to the doing. And I thought it was probably going to be a 5-year process to be able to replace my income. And, I was in the pharmaceutical industry doing pretty well. And thanks, to God and a lot of hard work, we were able to make that happen in about 5 months. And we were able to leave pharma and been full-time coach and speaker ever since. And it has been amazing. It's been, there's been ups and downs, but it has been an incredible gift that, now I get to do and be more of who I was put on the planet to be. And I truly believe that God put me here for a number of reasons, but I believe that God put me here to help people figure out why they're here. And so, I get to do that as my day gig, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, man, talk about time collapse. 5 years down to 5 months.
Yes.
That's incredible. And, I have to imagine that's just because you were able to help so many people get what they wanted. Get the help that they needed. And that kind of leads to the next question that I want to ask you, because you are recognized as one of the world's top success coaches. It's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner. Backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free Rinse PDF. How do you help people get clarity on what they want and achieve more than they thought possible? And now, I mean, you work with some of the biggest names out there. But I wonder, when you first started, and you, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I'm assuming you were probably working with, regular everyday people like myself.
100%.
So how, what are some of the nuggets for our listeners and viewers who are those regular everyday Joes and Janes that need some help on getting clarity on what they want and how they can achieve what they didn't think was possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why I was so excited to talk with you, because I know you've got rock stars that listen. Your audience is awesome, right? These people are achievers. They believe in positive persistence, and that's why they listen. So they, just like a car pulling up to a gas pump, they want to get filled up so they can keep going, right? And so I can just imagine your folks. Now, here's the thing: is for me, I'm an expensive coach. So I really only work with highly successful people. And what's interesting about that is there's a misperception there that a lot of people assume, well, if somebody's already successful, they don't need a coach. And I would counter that to say, well, many times people are successful because they've had coaches and mentors in their corner.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do with my people, but I did that from the very beginning, is I gave them permission and space to actually explore new dreams. Dreams that they have for themselves. Because what's interesting, and Ian, you know this, you work with a lot of very successful people. There are a lot of people who have achieved success in a track because that track opened up as the first job they got out of college, and then they just stayed on that track. And because they're driven and because they want to be successful, they have just continued on that track and found success. But oftentimes when I get, one-on-one with these successful people, everyone around them thinks, oh my gosh, they've got it all together. They got all the answers. They must be so pleased. They must be so satisfied with life, all of that.
Right.
But when you get, behind closed doors, they admit, I'm doing this because my dad said I should go into this industry, and here they are 25 years into the industry. Right. Or I'm doing this because it made sense, or I'm doing this because this door opened and this door opened and this door opened. And oftentimes what I'm doing with them is to be able to say, hey, that's great. And I rarely will say, quit your job and move to, Fiji. Right. Which would be awesome for some people, but not for everybody. Right. But, and I don't suggest that, but I'll say, hey, what are some new dreams that don't involve necessarily you shutting down life and moving somewhere around the, the other side of the planet? Mm-hmm. But what are some new dreams, small dreams, that you could at least get started trying some new things, right? And that's oftentimes what I'm doing with my highly successful people, is not like a major life overhaul of shutting down everything and completely starting new. But instead saying, hey, what do you want to experiment with? What's something new you want to try? And sometimes that will lead to new experiences. Some of my people have had a lot of success with those experiments. They continue to experiment, and that's led them to launch companies. That's led some to write books. That's led others to actually quit and become full-time speakers talking about that kind of thing. And that's wonderful. But for others, sometimes those new experiments just inject a new sense of excitement, a new sense of hope. And sometimes it's even experiments on new ways to handle challenges in their current situation. So I was working with one executive and she hired me. And when she hired me as her coach, she said, Mitch, I think I want to hire you to help me leave my job. And I was like, I will definitely help you do that. But I ask one thing. I said, will you allow us a couple of weeks to do some visioning first? Because if you do the visioning and you decide you do want to leave this career, I'm there for you. But if you do this visioning, maybe you'll decide to double down. She's like, well, I can tell you that's not going to happen. I was like, I get it. But can I have your permission that we do the visioning first? And she's like, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a few weeks of visioning. And sure enough, she realized, she's like, I actually have loved my career. I have loved my position, but lately I don't like my position. I don't like my career. I don't like my fellow employees and leadership.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we started to say, all right, what are some small things that we could do to start with navigating that differently? What are some new things? Not to say, oh, this one thing is for sure going to change everything, but what are some experiments that we could do that might start to make those small but important changes? And so one of the things was we launched some experiments on how to address and navigate a really, really negative peer, a coworker. And she tried these experiments, and I'll never forget, she came on probably as like the 5th call of 10 calls. And she's like, well, you've already paid for yourself. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she goes, I'm navigating this tough situation. She said, but I just had the best feedback in the world come from the most surprising place. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, well, I was home last night. I was making dinner and my 9-year-old daughter came in and she said, Mom, what's different about you? And she said, I'll never forget. She said, I was cutting carrots and I stopped and I looked at my daughter and I said, well, what do you mean, honey? And her daughter said, well, Mom, you're happy again. Like, why are you happy again? Like, you haven't been happy for a while. Like, why are you happy now?
Oh, man.
And she said she started to get, tears coming out of her eyes. Yeah. And I started to get misty too, as she's telling me the story. And she explained to her daughter, she said, well, honey, I have a bully in my office and I've learned some strategies for standing up to the bully. And I've realized I'm really good at my job and I really enjoy my job. And I'm actually pretty good at handling this bully now. And her daughter's like, well, I've got a bully in my class. Can you help me with my bully? And her mom was like, absolutely, that kind of thing. So what's beautiful is she had hired me to, help her quit her job and start something new. Mm-hmm. But instead we did a series of experiments that allowed her to fall in love with her job again, allowed her to stand up for herself, allowed her actually, as it turns out, to get a big promotion about 6 months later, right? Those kinds of things. And instead of leaving a career she thought she hated, she equipped herself with experiments to allow her to excel to new levels, right? And so that's what I often will tell people is like, yeah, sometimes your dreams, your goals should be big, expansive things. Mm-hmm. But sometimes those dreams can simply be to experiment in new and intentional ways to take your life in ways that you didn't expect or imagine.
Yeah. That is an amazing story. Man, that is pulls on the heartstrings, when you're your kid, as we know, our children notice everything, right? And They notice more than we think. But when they stop to say, oh, why are you happy again?
Why are you happy? Yeah. Like, I'm like, oh, for a 9-year-old to notice that. It's like, oh, that's the best. That is the best.
That is definitely changing some lives right there. Man. You have said this word now a couple of times since we've been talking. And I know that it is a subject that you actually talked about recently on your podcast, Dream Think Do, and that is the word of permission.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could kind of unpack that word and why it's so important.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's people will label me a motivational speaker. But I'll say I'm more of a motivational conversationalist
Right.
because I like stories, I like strategies, those kinds of things. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting, because people will say like, "Oh, you're a motivational speaker, motivate me," and I'm like, "Oh, that's not really how it works. You
Yeah.
actually have to motivate yourself. You have to inspire yourself. I can share stories, I can share strategies with you, but it's up to you to actually motivate yourself. It's up to you to inspire yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is you take one step back from that, then it's actually up to the individual to give themselves permission to be motivated,
Okay.
right? And when you take a step back from the thought of I want to dream, well, it actually starts with you giving yourself permission to dream. Because like I know I'm guessing you don't have a lot of preschoolers that listen to your podcast. Like your podcast is amazing, but I'm guessing most of your listenership are adults. And if they are adults, that means that they've had some amazing experiences in life. And that probably also means they've had some disappointments.
Mm-hmm.
They've had some setbacks. They've had some things happen to them that were completely outside their control. And at the same time, they've probably had some bad things happen to them because they made a bad decision at some point.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
And so the reason why I talk about this when it comes to permission is that it's interesting to give yourself space and time and permission to dream. It can be exciting, but it can also feel dangerous. Right. For some people, when I talk with them about their dreams, some people have had a rough go. Maybe they've had a setback because they went after a dream. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they had someone let them down because they went after a dream.
Yeah.
Maybe they had something go entirely differently than they'd hoped. They're now dealing with some situation they hadn't expected because they went after a dream. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's one of those things where sometimes those things really happened, but most of the time it's because people think they could happen.
Okay.
Right? Like we all know that if we go after dreams, bad things can happen. They absolutely can.
Yeah.
Right. And our brain knows that. Like there is a part of our brain, the amygdala, which is amazing. I call it our body's, built in bodyguard. Our amygdala, some people call it the lizard brain, is the very thing that, if we're walking down a dark street, it's the thing that says, don't go down the alley that's even darker. Right. It's the
Right.
thing that says, oh, don't invest in the timeshares of oil refineries or, that kind of thing. Like that seems a little dodgy, all that stuff, right? The amygdala is really good at a number of things, but it's absolutely horrible at knowing what is real and what is imagined. The
Okay.
amygdala thinks that any danger is as real as the desk that we're sitting on,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the amygdala, like what's amazing about our prefrontal cortex, which is another part of the brain, that's where we vision, it's where we imagine, it's where we dream. So our prefrontal cortex is really creative, and it oftentimes we will start to think about like that dream trip or the dream career or the dream relationship, but our amygdala will start to process where's the danger or where's the potential danger. So like if we were on the plains of the Serengeti, our amygdala would be in high gear looking for prides of lions lurking around that are hungry, saying I want a little bit of that, right?
Yeah.
Two
Right.
scoops of Mitch, 2 scoops of Ian, right?
Right.
But our amygdala does the same thing when we start to dream. Our prefrontal
It's
cortex,
the
part of our brain
guardrail.
might say, oh, I would love to go to Australia for 2 weeks. I would love to swim off the Gulf Coast of Australia. And our amygdala says, well, I saw a documentary once about people getting eaten by alligators, and I think there's stingrays there. I don't think we should go.
Puts the
Right?
guardrails.
Or
Yeah.
exactly right. You might say, well, I would love to have a business that impacts the world. I would love to inspire people to do amazing things and really like take life and just take it to the next level. And the amygdala goes, but we have a friend who started a business and they lost everything. We shouldn't do that.
Mm.
Right. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is that, again, the amygdala, whether it's something real that you've experienced or it's collecting data all the time. So every time you scroll or every time you click on the TV, every time even you watch news at the gym while you're on the Stairmaster, your amygdala is collecting information of
Yeah.
all of the dangers. And think about that. Think about we don't really watch TV in our house. We love movies and that kind of stuff. We watch sports, but like we don't watch news at all in the house. But like when I go to the gym and there's like 10 different TVs and 8 or 9 of them are on the news, like what does the news do? The news just bombards you with bad,
Yeah.
scary
Negative.
stories, right?
Yeah.
And our amygdala is collecting all that information. So when we
Yeah.
start to dream and think about what might be possible, our amygdala kicks in and goes, but wait, somebody died doing that. Somebody blew up doing that. Somebody destroyed their lives doing that. No, we shouldn't do that, right? And so our prefrontal cortex has to step in. That's the boss of the brain, and say, wait, I'm giving us, and I talk like I've got multiple personalities here, but it's almost like when you think about these different characters in your brain, it almost makes it easier to
Yeah.
navigate some of this
Absolutely.
stuff. And your prefrontal cortex needs to kick in and be the boss of the brain that it's designed to be, to say, you know what? Yes, there are potential dangers, but I give us permission to start exploring this. I give us permission to start thinking, and I give us permission to start doing. And that's, when we start to talk about permission to do, I'm a big believer in steps of faith, not big blind leaps of faith. Like I love to, say, all right, maybe it's not quitting your job and moving to Fiji, but maybe you want to take a cooking class. Maybe you want to try something different. Like I had Sean Askinosi on my podcast, and Sean's an incredible story and a great example of giving yourself permission, because he was a unbeaten trial attorney, incredible run, wildly successful. But he started to notice he was losing passion for the law, which was a really big deal because he felt like it was his life calling. It was definitely in his identity. And so instead of just quitting being an attorney, he gave himself permission to start doing little experiments, to find his passion again, to try things out. And one of those experiments led him to a cooking class. And then another experiment led him to a cooking class specifically on chocolate. And he started to realize he loved chocolate and making chocolate and gourmet chocolate. And then he started to go down the line of how do I source this to get, if I use a better, was it bean? Yeah, like a cocoa bean, I get better chocolate. So how do I source this myself? And he started to explore that. And as he did, he started to realize how corrupt the cocoa bean industry was, and how the farmers were really just getting beat up by the big companies. And so then his heart for justice, which had, driven him as an attorney, led him to go and start meeting with these farmers in different places, the Philippines and in Central America and South America and all these things. And Sean then actually started a small batch chocolate company with his daughter, and they just did it on the side, but then it took off. And then this woman called Oprah, I'm not sure who she is, but apparently she blessed his business and put it in her magazine and said it's the best chocolate in the world. And it took off. They're in Missouri. It's not like, they're in a rodeo, or, whatever, crazy glamorous places. They're doing this out of Missouri. But Sean experimented and gave himself permission to try new things. And that led him to now have Askinosi chocolate with his daughter, and they're shipping gourmet small batch chocolate all around the world. And that's his full-time gig. And it's just this great example of, he had to give himself permission. He didn't go from being, basically an undefeated defense attorney or a prosecuting attorney all the way to having Askinosi chocolate.
Yeah.
That wasn't an overnight thing. That was about a 5-year process of giving himself permission to do these little experiments that led to something else entirely.
And that's really all about allowing yourself, I guess, to Well, to dream, but also
Yeah.
to dream outside the box. Like it's okay to, I think, and the point I want to make is I think a lot of adults are scared to try something new because they think
Yep.
that because they're adults, they should already have all the answers, right?
Right.
They don't
Yep.
enter with, what some may call the white belt mentality, or
Yes.
being a novice, or letting that
Yeah.
be okay that they don't know how to do something. And that's really uncomfortable, especially for someone who's been in a role, as you said, for maybe 25 years and have been rocking at
Yep.
this job, but they find out that they just don't have the passion for it anymore. And they finally looked up from, with had their chin to the grindstone, or whatever that saying is, for 2 decades. They look up and they're like,
Right.
I think I really like where I'm at,
Exactly.
but I'm more comfortable doing what I've done all this
Yep.
time than I am learning something new, because
Yep.
that's scary and I don't know how to do it.
Right.
What do you
And you have to admit you need help, or you have to admit you need to learn new things. All of those things, all of that is scary. And it's one more thing, two more things, many more things. You have to give yourself permission to say, it's okay, amygdala. Like, I'm not in danger by taking a night class. It's okay. I'm not in danger by asking for help from a friend.
Yeah.
I'm not in danger to have coffee with somebody who looks like they're doing something interesting just for the sake of having a conversation. Right. And so you have to give yourself a permission to take those small but significant steps. But as you do, it's amazing what can happen.
Yeah. That in itself is amazing. Those small steps, because, just in some of the stories that you've told us today, like, you never know what could happen.
Yep. Exactly.
Right. And
And
the
you
only
don't know when you start, right? You have
Yeah.
to figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just as simple as, in my mind, thinking like, you already know what's going to happen if you keep doing the same thing. Like, why not find out what happens if you don't?
Right.
Why not?
So true. I love it.
Man, well, Mr. Matthews, I could sit and listen to you all day long, but I know that you are a super busy man, and I want to say just how much I appreciate you being on the show. So many nuggets and pearls of wisdom that you have dropped for our listeners and our viewers. But I want to make sure that they can get more of Double M
Yeah.
Mitch Matthews. So where can they find you? I know we've only talked about one of your podcasts, unless you have two, but yeah,
Right.
you can let everybody know where they can find
Yeah.
more of you.
Absolutely. Best place to start is just go to mitchmatthews.com. We spent our whole marketing budget coming up with that domain name. But yeah, mitchmatthews.com. It's where they can find out more about Dream Think Do. And like you said, we do have a second podcast called Encouraging the Encouragers, which is a podcast specifically for the encouragers, coaches, speakers, content creators. I truly believe that if you're doing that important work, like the work that you are doing, you deserve to be paid well for that work. So that's what we want to do is with that podcast. Is those are shorter episodes geared specifically for those, the coaches, the speakers, the content creators who deserve to be encouraged because they're doing the groundbreaking work to help others to be more, to do more of what they were put on the planet to do. So that's a fun project as well.
That is awesome. I love
Yeah.
that name. I just love that name. All right, family, that is another awesome episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast. Do yourselves a favor and go check out Mitch Matthews. Hit him up on Instagram, follow him, and I promise you will not be sorry. He is, like I said, a general in the army of the light. So we're going to wrap this bad boy up. And like we always say, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.